And listening to Penny Wong in our Melbourne studio was the incoming CEO of the Australian industry group, Willox. Willox, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tony.
You've just heard Penny Wong's position. How hard will business and industry groups be pushing tomorrow on these issues of green and red tape?
Look, these are big issues for industry generally across Australia. It's one of the curses in many ways of our history. We have a federation with the states, federal government, local government, and now we have a range of intertwined crossover rules and regulations which, quite frankly, inhibit industries like manufacturing, like construction, like even the mining sector in many ways. So it's good to sit down and have a serious look at how industry is being impacted by all these crossovers in terms of regulation. They're impacting businesses' ability to move labour, businesses' ability to move their own operations around the country, and businesses' ability to grow. And at this time, when we see the economy, although we are doing well in some regards, but big parts of the economy are struggling, it's important to have a look at these issues to see what's been done in the past and has it been done properly and what needs to be done in the future.
All right, on the detail, let's start with the very large increase in red tape that you've actually endorsed today, the Australian Industry Participation Plans. Is some red tape better than others?
Well, we don't see that as red tape. We see that as quite a sensible approach, actually, to the future of industry in Australia, and it's something that industry would quite happily sign up to allow Australian industry to have proper visibility around major projects, major resources projects, major construction projects, infrastructure projects, and areas where there are significant government grants. What industry's been after here in this area for a long time is visibility and transparency, and there's been a sense now for many years that there hasn't been that, so there hasn't been the fair go for Australian industry.
But you're right, it's about disclosure, but these plans require new paperwork, breaking down all the key goods and services procured, submissions to government on all contracts awarded, details of the tendering processes, and updated every 6 months. So that is red tape, isn't it?
Look, it's disclosure, and we see that as being important. And this was part of a decision taken by a committee recommending to government, which included industry participants, including myself and representatives of major companies. So we're all aware of what's involved here, and it was a decision taken quite deliberately to try and give Australian industry a fair go. To your point earlier, we know of at least 3 major resources projects that have been signed off recently where procurement is going to occur virtually all from overseas. Why is it that in Western Australia, where there's significant growth at the moment, the strong point of the Australian economy, steel fabricators are going broke and going out of business?
Well, that is the question the unions have asked as well. And so I ask you this: did you ask the government or try to encourage the government to go to mandated levels of Australian manufactured goods and services in these giant projects?
Not at all. Mandated procurement is not the way to go. That's going to just put us into a cul-de-sac economically. We compete globally. All businesses within Australia compete globally. We all know that. It was part of a discussion today with the Prime Minister's Manufacturing Task Force, where one of the big themes that came out of that discussion was that we are all part of a global supply chain, and part of the secrets to growing Australian business is to get Australian business involved in that global supply chain. So mandated procurement is just another form of protectionism. That's not going to fly in the current global environment. We know that. Nobody's pushing that. What we're pushing for is just the transparency and the fair go. If Australian business can't compete on a project on cost or quality, well then fair enough. But at least Australian business should be given the opportunity to compete, and that's where the argument lies.
OK, to the broader issues that are going to be discussed at the roundtable tomorrow, what is the green tape the industry group is most concerned with?
Look, there are a range of areas. You look at environmental regulations around Australia. If you're a national company operating in Australia, there's well over 300 different environmental regulations that you have to comply with right across the country. There's overlap left, right and centre. What we're saying is, let's have a look at this, let's strip it back, let's determine what is essential, what most importantly is redundant. There's a lot of redundant regulation around, which is a function of our history. So let's just clean it out and make it easier for business to operate, particularly at a time when we're about to have the introduction of a carbon tax.
Well, in fact, I'll just come to that quickly, because the opposition says that's the biggest piece of green tape that there is, and it's jeopardising the economy. Do you agree or not?
Look, the carbon tax is happening from July 1. We all know that, and the government's committed to it. The government and opposition are committed to the same targets. It is going to be a compliance burden on industry. There's no doubt about that. It's going to increase costs for industry. There will be a flow down through the economy, which will make business harder in many cases. So we recognise that. But what we're about is trying to make it as easy for business to make the transition and to adopt to the new requirements. And stripping back that regulation is something that we don't believe the government did when it was introducing the carbon tax and that legislation. There wasn't enough attention paid to the regulatory requirements around the tax, the existing regulations that were in place. And this is a good opportunity to have a look at it.
So we're unaware of your views to a large degree. Do you share the belief that your predecessor Heather Ridout had, that there does need to be a price on carbon and that it should be regulated through an emissions trading scheme?
We've taken this view over a long time. This dates back to 2006 and 2007 when there was first discussion under the Howard government about how to address these issues. And I think you alluded to earlier that the Howard government was looking at an emissions trading scheme. So in some ways this has been an inevitability in the public policy debate within Australia. The question is how best to frame it. Do we need a carbon tax? Do we need an emissions trading scheme? What price should there be? Make a couple of points on price. $23 a tonne escalating up to almost $26 a tonne over the next couple of years before the emissions trading scheme is introduced is too high a price. We've argued for a long time now that there should be a softer starting price at around $10 a tonne, which is a figure now I hear much more frequently in the public policy debate. Compared to our European competitors, we're putting ourselves at a major disadvantage. So do you
take the view, and do the combined industry and business groups take the view that this could still be changed, or is it now inevitable it's going to be at that price? How much pressure could you put on the government if you think it can be changed?
Look, it's been legislated, so it's very hard to turn the legislation around. The government has an agreement with the Greens. This is sort of by chance or by happenstance, depending on your viewpoint. This was the price that the Greens took to the last election, $23 a tonne, which raises a few eyebrows. But this is a function in many ways of a political discussion. It's happening from July 1. We will need to make this transition as easy as possible for business. And we'll come back to the price again once we see it in operation. OK,
a final question. What's your view on the coalition policy of controlling emissions through direct government intervention?
Still needs some work, I think. It still needs to be fleshed out. We still need to see detail on that. The important thing from the opposition is that they've agreed to the same target in terms of emissions reduction. The question is how we get there. We're continuing to talk to the opposition about their approach. It still needs some work, and it's a work in progress. I'm sure you'll hear more from them as time goes on.
Ines Willox, we'll hear more from you as time goes on too, I'm sure. For your first interview on Lateline, we thank you very much for being there.
Thanks, Tony.